Okay, so with the release of Reforged comes a raft of new units which have shaken up the power balance in the game quite a bit actually. So I am going to be doing the top 10s again, although I will be doing them sort of a little bit more spaced out because some of the lists are a little bit more easier to test and sort of figure out than others. For example, the archery one is going to be interesting to try and test because a lot of them have got an extreme amount of power in melee as well as at range. So sort of divining which ones are worthy of higher spots is going to take a little longer. However, there is a list that I can do right now, which is the shock infantry, because the shock infantry is a very straightforward thing. So we will jump right in at number 10, I think. So, coming in at number 10, we have Isengard's Nazug High, and they are essentially more elite variants of the Berserkers. They have this very nice helm, of course, very iconic of Isengard. In terms of stats, we are looking at 28 attack, 25 defense, and 11 charge, so very high numbers compared to vanilla. And in terms of their abilities, they inspire their nearby allies, they frighten nearby enemies, they're good versus armor, of course, and they have excellent stamina, and they are also good in the snow. They also have 3 hit points, and really the only thing that's missing here, which would have propelled them much higher on the list, is the fact that they don't have good armor. They are very lightly armored. They have a high defense, but they don't have any sort of armor stats, which is a bit of a problem when you put them up against very survivable units, because they can be outlasted. They are the victims of attrition. But nonetheless, they are still extremely damaging, and that's why they're up on this list. They do manage to beat some of the units which are below them in terms of just how much damage they can get done, and that is why they are on this list. They are very expensive at 1200 florins, but they are also Isengard's most elite foot infantry unit, of course, if you don't count the trolls. So at number 9 we have one of only 2 returning units to the list, and that is the Eldar Swordsman. The buff to survivability across the board has helped these guys out a great deal because they now manage to stay fighting for longer, which is all that I ever asked of them, and now they are everything that I wanted them to be in vanilla, essentially. I perhaps unfairly criticised some of the elven units in vanilla, but now, because of the heavier focus on elite infantry and the buff to survivability, these guys are certainly very good. Although the fact that other units have been added means they aren't the best two-handed sword unit. In terms of stats, you're looking at 28 attack, 32 defense, and 12 charge, so slightly better stats than Nazakai. They're also good versus armor. They have excellent armor and stamina as well, so they may not have like the fear abilities, and they don't have any hit points. They are the only unit on this list that doesn't have hit points, which it's impressive that they managed to break onto a list, because there are units that do have hit points and they managed to be better than. And the Nazakai are not the only ones. They managed to beat Berserkers, they managed to beat the Dragon's Wrath Guildsmen, and also the Battle-Ready Dunedain, which have no place on this list. The one that I placed at number 1 in vanilla is now only at number 12, so they are not on the list at all. They're also better than the Sylvan Elves unit because they have a higher attack, a noticeably higher attack as well, which is very important when you're looking at a two-handed sword unit. So at number 8 we have the Abrazanim Nad Uzagar. Fantastic name, very easy to pronounce, I appreciate that. This is an interesting unit because Harad, they never really had any shock infantry in vanilla, but now they have a very good shock infantry indeed, able to mix it with the best of the units. Very good looking unit as well, an Umbar inspired unit, this one. In terms of stats, we're looking at 22 attack, 29 defense, and 9 charge. They are good versus armor, and they have a combat bonus in deserts. They have excellent armor and stamina, and they have 2 hit points. And that 2 hit points is what puts them over the Eldar Swordsman, because their stats are a little bit lower, but they still have the excellent armor and stamina, and they have the combat bonuses as well, and that 2 hit points means they're just a little bit more tanky. So at number 7, and the only other returning unit on this list, we have the Dale Swordmasters, and these guys have been given a pretty heavy buff indeed. Looking at their stats, we have 26 attack, 30 defense, and 11 charge. They are good versus armor and have excellent armor themselves and excellent stamina, and they have 2 hit points. Now, they actually have better stats than a couple of the units that are above them, but the real problem they have is the numbers in their unit. It's slightly less, which actually does count pretty heavily against them in the long run. But nonetheless, individually they are extremely, extremely good. They're very... The buff that they've been given really helps Dale, because Dale actually got less in terms of new units than, for instance, Gondor did, which, you know, I do appreciate that these guys are now more survivable, because they always had the same problem that most shock infantry had in vanilla, only it was pretty heavily exacerbated in the fact that they were very fragile, or it seemed like they were very fragile anyway. Their stats certainly didn't display that, but the buff across all shock infantry in terms of survivability was a welcome one for these guys in both Moss and in this. So at number 6 we have the Temple Berserkers, or better known as the Dismounted Black Numenorians. Very good looking unit, and in terms of their stats we're looking at 21 attack, 27 defense and 11 charge. They inspire allies and frighten enemies, as most very elite orc units do. They are also good versus armor, and they are also good in the woods and in the snow, which is, you know, a pretty diverse roster of terrains. And they also have excellent stamina. Now, they don't have excellent armor, they only have good armor, but it is still worth saying that their armor is good. But that's okay, because they have 3 hit points as opposed to just 2, which means they're basically on par with the units that have 2 hit points and excellent armor, more or less. They're a little bit more vulnerable to arrows, but in melee you're not really going to notice much of a difference. So, reaching the halfway point, we have Rune's Brotherhood of the Axe. So, the stats on these guys, we're looking at 24 attack, 30 defense, and 12 charge. They are good versus armor and in deserts. They have only good stamina, but they have excellent armor, and they inspire nearby allies. So they are essentially similar to the Abrazanim of Harad, but they have better stats. They also, of course, have 2 hit points. Really good looking unit this, actually. I really do like them. So, at number 4, we have a unit that I expected to be challenging for the top, and they are certainly one of the better units on the list. We have the Sons of Theorem of Dwarves, of course. In terms of stats, we're looking at 29 attack, 29 defense, and 12 charge, so a lot across the board. They are good versus armor, and they're good in the snow, and they have excellent armor and stamina, as most Dwarven units do, and of course, 2 hit points. So at number 3 we have the Witch Realm Hammerguard of Gundabad, and I'm pretty sure that this is the first time Gundabad have shown up on a top 10 list of any description. And they've received such a heavy buff in this submod. Actually, it's pretty nice to see, honestly, because they were such a joke in vanilla. But now, the Witch Realm Hammers, and they have an attack of 26, a defense of 30, and a charge of 14. So they have a lower attack than the Sons of Durin, but what really got me was some of the abilities that they have. They can inspire allies, they frighten enemies, they're good in the snow and against armor, and they have excellent armor and stamina, and they have 2 hit points, and they have more men in the unit than anything that's come before on this list other than the Eldar Enway swords, but then they have the hit points to make up for that. The only reason they aren't number 1, honestly, is because the 2 units that are ahead of them have got stats that are so good that they managed to actually beat these guys in melee. Other than that, though, the Witch Realm Hammers. At number 2, you can expect to see a lot of the elves on these lists, simply because their elite units are so damn good. We have the Cinderblade Masters. So, looking at their stats, we have 33 attack, 33 defense, and 11 charge. They can hide anywhere. They are good versus armor. They have excellent armor and stamina themselves, and of course, the 2 hit points. It's those stats which really put them above the others. They can just carve their way through units with high attack and high defense. And so, at number 1, we have the Haven Guard of Gondor. And, in terms of stats, we have 33 attack, 35 defense, and 15 charge, which is a ridiculous amount of charge for an infantry unit. And they are good versus armor, and they have excellent armor and stamina, which is, you know, kind of uneventful, but really those stats are what makes it. And of course they have 2 hit points. I don't know what's in the water down in Dol Amroth, but my god, their units are pretty damned impressive all across the board. So that was the first top 10 for Reforged. Of course I will go through each list again, although some will take longer than others, of course. Like I said, with the archery one it's a little bit more complex. With the heavy infantry one there's a lot to consider. And with regards to the top 10 factions again, that will probably take the longest, because of course I'll need to really immerse myself in it and really try out every faction in a number of ways before I'm able to give an informed opinion on that. Nonetheless, that was the first of the lists, and I hope to see you for future videos.